You don't need a luxury kitchen to prepare gourmet meals. My name is Dennis. I live in a mobile home in a trailer park, and this is my kitchen. What I want to make today is a classic recipe. And these recipes become classics because they're so delicious. This is a classic French chicken fricassee. If you're not familiar with it, it's a chicken that's kind of cooked twice. First you brown it really well in olive oil and butter, and then you finish cooking the chicken in vegetables, and then finally to complete the dish, you make a reduction sauce or a gravy to go over the top. Put it all in a big casserole dish, put it on the table, serve it family style. It sounds really delicious. I like chicken anyway, so this should be good. Let's get into the ingredients I'm going to be using for making my classic French chicken fricassee. I've assembled my mise en place for this recipe. This looks like a lot and complicated, but it's actually fairly simple to work with. Just to explain a few of the things that I have here, this is my jar of clarified butter. I always have clarified butter in the refrigerator. I clarify it a pound at a time. Basically what you do is you melt it all and you draw out the pure clear butter fat, discarding the water, discarding the foam on top. So you get pure butter fat. That removes the solids, which tends to burn. It removes the water, which contains most of the salt. I like working with clarified butter. I have thinly sliced pancetta here. I also put in some leftover prosciutto that I had. I'm going to work that into my recipe. The prosciutto is not necessary, but I think it'll add more flavor to my recipe. I've got it. I need to use it up. This ice here is my frozen chicken stock. I buy whole chickens and then I trim the chickens. I'll fillet off the meat that I want. All the trim, the skin, the bones, everything that's left over will go into the freezer. And then when I have enough pieces in there, I'll make chicken stock from all of that. Why throw those scraps out? You can make stock and they're practically free. So this is 2 cups of my homemade unsalted chicken stock. These are fingerling potatoes here. I thought they looked good. I thought they would be fun to work with. You can just use 1 or 2 potatoes in the pot. It's not going to really matter that much. I thought these would be fun to work with. This jar down here, this is my cooked flour. I'm going to use a little bit of this for thickening when I reduce my sauce. What I do with cooked flour, and I always have cooked flour in the cupboard, you put flour in a skillet. I use a stainless steel skillet so I don't have to worry about damaging the non-stick coating, and then stir, stir, stir over the heat while that's cooking. You'll start smelling the fragrance of cooking flour. As soon as it starts to turn into a light golden color, it's done. Remove it from the heat, but keep stirring it because the pan is hot. And if it sits on the hot pan, the bottom will scorch. So that's an explanation of some of the ingredients I have here in my mise en place. The rest of this is pretty obvious. Mushrooms, celery, onion, carrot. You don't need a full explanation of everything here. I bought a whole chicken, and therefore I'm going to need to cut this up. You don't need to do that. You can buy pre-cut chicken if you want. I think buying a whole chicken and then cutting it up yourself saves you the most money. It's the most economical. But if you want to just buy sectioned chicken, that's fine. You can even buy pieces you like. For example, if you want all chicken breast, then just buy chicken breast pieces and avoid the dark meat. You're going to need at least 3 pounds of chicken, which is about 1.4 kilograms. This actually is larger than that. This chicken here is close to 5 pounds. Let me start by cutting down to the rib cage. There's a bone that rises up right here. They call it the keel. And I want to just cut down to the wishbone down here, right alongside that keel. There's my wishbone right there. Then what I can do, I'm trying to keep one hand clean and dry. It makes it easier to work so I don't slip. I'm using some poultry shears here because they will cut right through the bones I'm going to go right down through everything, including the wishbone. There it is. So there's my chicken, split that way. Before I go any further, I might as well take the wings off, because I'm going to need to do that. So turning my bird over, just going to cut down. I'm very careful at this point, because I don't want to damage the breast meat. So I cut very close to the joint for that chicken wing, so I can cut the wing off without damaging the breast meat. You can see there's my breast meat right there. And I probably have to tell you that I've been doing this for years, so I know where everything is. So there's my 2 wings. Let me do the legs next. I'm going to leave all the bone in. I'm not going to debone this bird. I'm just going to work with whole chicken pieces. And then when you pull this back, you can actually feel the joint release. And then I cut right along the side of the pelvis, because there's a nice piece of meat right in there that I don't want to lose. Same down here. There's a nice piece of meat right in here. So I get in there and just work around it. Make sure I cut that piece of meat out. Then, once I'm down to the joint, I can just simply cut that off. And there's those 2 pieces of meat. There and there. If I had just lopped that off right down through the joint, I would have lost those 2 nice pieces of meat. I know by feel there's a joint right in here. There's also this line of fat that tells you where the joint is. If you feel it, feel the joint and just go right down through the joint. You don't have to cut any bone. The knife just slides right through that joint. Drumstick, thigh meat. Same thing on this side. I know you butchers out there, professional butchers, are probably laughing because you can do this in 30 seconds, where it takes me several minutes to do all of this. I've done it enough that I'm comfortable doing it, but I'm certainly no professional. Getting those 2 pieces of meat out, pop the joint, and then cut right down through that joint, saving that meat. Same thing here, cut down through the joint. And there's another drumstick and another piece of thigh meat. All right, I've already sectioned, cut this in half down the middle. I have the backbone to deal with here. These big pieces of fat, these can be cut off and used for rendering later. Now, cutting down alongside this pelvic bone, there's a big bone right here. You're not going to cut through it very easily. But down close to the backbone here, you can cut down through the ribs. So there's one breast piece with the rib on. This here is that keel. If you wanted to, you could cut on the other side and take that keel out. It doesn't really matter. I'll do it just to show you that it can be done. And get in there with your shears. I want to make sure I section this breast meat off so I don't lose any of my breast meat. That's the keel. But there is a nice big piece of breast meat with the rib cage on. On this side, I don't need all of this back in there. So again, cutting alongside that pelvic bone. And then cutting through the ribs right alongside that backbone. There's my other breast section, and this is the back. I'm going to throw this in the pan and cook with it. There's virtually no meat on there at all. It's pretty much useless, but it will add flavor to the pot, and then I can discard this later on. I'll do the same thing with the neck. I'll put that in there, and the keel. These bones will just add more flavor to my dish, and then I'll just discard them later. So if I made that look simple, to me it is simple. It just takes practice. Once you learn where the various places are to cut, where the joints are, then just practice, and after a while it gets really simple. The last thing I need to do is just salt and pepper these pieces. I'm just going to sprinkle them all over a little bit with salt and pepper before I start browning them. Some freshly grated black pepper. That's it. Seasoned, I can start browning my chicken. I'm bringing heat up under my pan here. I want this to be over medium-high heat. And then I'm going to put in a couple tablespoons of my regular cooking olive oil. This is pure olive oil. This isn't extra virgin. Save the extra virgin for flavoring. And I'm just going to take out some of my clarified butter. About a tablespoon or so. That's kind of hard because it's hard from the refrigerator. Okay. Then once this comes up to heat, I'll start browning my pieces a few at a time. I obviously can't fit the whole chicken in there. And then I set a platter aside that I'm going to put my browned chicken in to hold it while I continue to brown the other pieces. My pan is starting to heat up here, so I'm going to put in about 1/3 of that pancetta that I had set aside. This is 1 ounce of pancetta, or about 28 grams. You can see how quickly that shrivels up. It's going to render some fat and brown. That's going to give me some flavor. And then pushing that around to the sides. I'm going to start laying in my chicken pieces. So there's one of the thighs, another thigh, one drumstick, another drumstick. You want to take your time browning these. You want to get them really nicely browned. A nice dark color makes this dish look very good. In doing this, you're also going to cook them about 2/3, 3/4 of the way through those chicken pieces. I put a splatter screen over this to help keep my stove clean. I've turned my chicken over 1 time already. You can see how nicely browned those are. I can probably brown those just a little bit more. In the meantime, I'm going to take my pancetta out before it gets too brown. I don't want that to burn. So there is all my browned chicken, and there is my pancetta. That's all been browned. Put that in a separate bowl. I'm going to cover this with foil and set this aside to keep it warm while I start working on my vegetables. I'm not making a fine bolognese ragu here, so I don't need to dice the vegetables up too small. You can cut them into large chunks, 1.5 inches maybe, 4 centimeters. Think stew rather than ragu. I'm going to do my onion first, since this will cause me the most tears. If you've seen my other videos, you know I have my own way of chopping onions, different from the way the chefs do on TV. I think the way they do it is dangerous, and I've heard from people who say they've cut themselves. So I always quarter the onion first rather than work with it in half. Peel it. And then, again, because I don't need small pieces, I'm just going to do one chop down that way, flip it 90 degrees, one chop that way, and then big chops, like so. Just kind of a coarse chop. So that was one large onion, coarsely chopped. I'm going to chop up 2 shallots because these are rather large. If you have smaller shallots, use 4 of them. I'm not fond of the flavor of shallots unless they're caramelized. So I'm actually going to cut these up finer into slices. And I'm going to cook these first, cooking them longer to caramelize them a little bit in my pan before I start adding my other vegetables. I'm heating my pan again over medium-high heat. And I'm going to put some of my clarified butter in there again. You'll notice I still have the brown bits. I saved that. That's called the fond. As soon as I get this butter melted, that looks good. I'm going to add my shallots. As I mentioned, I don't like these. I don't care for the flavor of shallots unless they're caramelized. So I'm going to cook these for a while first before I add my onions and get these caramelized down a little bit. That'll probably take 10 to 15 minutes to get these really caramelized. While I'm waiting for my shallots to cook, I'm going to prep my other vegetables. Again, these only need to be coarsely chopped. I peeled 2 large carrots here. Going to cut these into fairly large chunks. Again, I'm thinking stew rather than ragu. Put that in my bowl. So, like my carrots, I'm just going to give my celery a coarse chop here. And I'm going to put my leaves in there because the leaves do add some flavor. There we go. I have in the meantime peeled these little fingerling potatoes. You probably don't need to because the skin is so thin and they're so small, but I did find some ugly dark bruising under a couple of them, so I thought I'd better just peel them to make sure I get rid of those black spots. After this goes in my bowl, I'm going to wash my mushrooms. Those are all trimmed and ready to go. I have about 14 of these fingerling potatoes here. You can see how nicely my shallots have caramelized. So now I'm going to toss in my sprigs of thyme. I can just throw that in there with string and all. The string will hold the twigs together, so it's easier to pull those out, but the leaves will come off in the process. I'm going to put my whole large chopped onion in there, and then using a garlic press, I'm going to start squeezing my garlic in there. So I have my minced garlic in there. I have 4 of these cloves to put in. There's the 4th and last of my garlic cloves. So that's in. I've raised my heat back up to medium high. I had turned my heat down as the shallots started to cook well. I'm going to cook these onions not until they're completely cooked. They don't have to be fully cooked at this point because they're going to be cooking a lot more. I'm going to cook these about 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes at most. You can see how my onions look there. I did taste one. They're still a little bit crisp, so they're not fully tender yet. Now to this I want to add my potatoes, my carrots, and my celery, not the mushrooms yet. Those are going to go in later. And then I want to put my crisp pancetta back in there. I'm going to reduce my heat to medium-low, and then I'm going to put a cover on that. And I'm going to cook that for 10 minutes, stirring it every 2 minutes or so to steam those vegetables and get them tender. All right, let's see if I can do this without fogging my lens. Let it all go up the other side. So those have been cooking now for 10 minutes. I want to add my mushrooms. One recipe says that this dish wouldn't be complete without mushrooms. I'm going to put some salt in there. Just a good sprinkling of salt. Some grate of black pepper. And then I want to arrange my chicken pieces on top. Drumsticks, thigh meat. I'm putting these pieces in first because I want to put the breast meat on top so that I can check this with a digital thermometer. I want to bring this up to, it'd be easier if I do it from this side. I want to bring this up to about 160 to 165 degrees internal temperature. That means my chicken is cooked to a safe temperature and it'll be okay to eat. And I might as well put my juice in there as well from the dish. All right, so I'm going to cover that and I'm just going to, again, cook this under medium-low heat until the chicken comes up to temperature. I'm not working with time right now. I'm working with temperature. I just transferred all of my chicken and my vegetables to a covered casserole dish. Put that in the oven that I have set for 200 degrees. That'll keep that warm. My chicken did come up to temperature. So now I'm going to bring the heat up under my liquid here. This is just the drippings from cooking the vegetables and finishing the cooking of the chicken. This is my chicken stock. Again, it's 2 cups. That's homemade chicken stock. You can use the stock that's available in the store, the broth, chicken broth. This has to thaw. It's almost thawed. It's like a snowball right now, a hard snowball. So I need to melt this in this pan. Meanwhile, while it's doing that, I'm going to add a splash of vermouth. I want about a 1/4 cup, about 60 milliliters of vermouth in there. Not a lot. I'm going to be putting in about 2 ounces of my pancetta in here. Now this is 1 ounce, 28. 1 or 2 ounces, I can't remember now. I'm so confused as far as having all of my. That's just going to rend and give my sauce some flavor. And this is 1 ounce-ish about. This was what was left over of the prosciutto. So that's about 28 grams or so. All of that meat is going to be strained out. It's just going to flavor my sauce. And then I'm going to put in maybe half a teaspoon of herbes de Provence. Herbes de Provence is just a mixture of herbs that are supposedly a traditional herb blend that is used in the Provence region of France. So as soon as this comes up to a boil, which it won't do until my ice is melted, it's almost there, I'm going to reduce this down to about half of my volume. And this will be the sauce for my chicken. I have here some of my cooked flour. I'm going to thicken this up a little bit with cooked flour. I don't want a gravy. I just want to have a slightly thicker texture than just simply like a reduction sauce, which will be more like a, well, it'll be too much of a liquid. Oh, and one other thing. This is the back. that I had browned earlier. I'm just going to boil that in the pan as I'm reducing the sauce. That tube will come out. Obviously, it's one of the solids, but it'll give me a little more flavor. So there's my liquid now. That's concentrated. I took out about half a cup and put it in a bowl to let it cool a little bit. And then I put in about 2 teaspoons of that cooked, lightly browned flour. Mix that in and then put it back in this pan. Now I'm just getting ready to bring this up to the boil to thicken this. If I measured right, I shouldn't have a gravy. I should have just a nice sauce. Meanwhile, I am going to taste this. If it needs any salt, now's the time to adjust it. My red handle tasting spoon. Needs nothing. So that's just coming up to the boil. You can see that that's not turning into a gravy. The last thing I want to do to finish that is put in a good tablespoon or 2 of butter. That'll thicken that a little bit, and it'll also give it a smooth creaminess. And I'm just about ready to see how everything tastes. So here is my casserole dish. I'm being careful with the steam so I don't fog my lens. I ran my sauce through a sieve just to get rid of any last solids. The last thing to do is plate this and then see how it tastes. All right, to plate this, I'll put a piece of chicken on the plate. Spoon some of my vegetables onto the side. That is beautiful. That is looking so beautiful. And then, a little bit more. I think that would be nice with just a little bit more. I mean, why not plenty of vegetables? They're healthy for you. And then finally, take some of the sauce and just pour it over the top. That's it. That is ready to taste. Chicken fricassee. Now, as you could see, this isn't a real fancy dish. It's not something that's, you know, fancy schmancy. It's just like comfort food. I'm going to taste one of my potatoes here. Wow. It's got a nice flavor to it. It has a real good potato flavor to it. But it also tastes from being cooked in that sauce. That's good. One of my mushrooms. As I said, chicken fricassee wouldn't be chicken fricassee without mushrooms. Or at least that's what I read. Oh, that is good. Then finally, a piece of my chicken here. Oh, that is tender and just so delicious. Oh, wow. It's a little bit too early for dinner, but that's all right. I'm going to go enjoy my dinner. Excuse me. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit the White Trash Cooking website and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.